Hey guys, tonight we're moving into a castle. But before you pack your crown and your sense of entitlement, I have some bad news. The castle you're imagining, the one with the warm fireplaces, the clean tapestries, and the romantic stone balconies, does not exist. The real medieval castle wasn't a palace. It was a military bunker designed by people who were terrified of dying and who apparently didn't believe in comfort, privacy, or fresh air. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Congratulations, you have just woken up in the year 1250. You are a noble. You live in the keep, the safest, highest and most prestigious part of the castle. You open your eyes, expecting to feel like a king. Instead, you feel like a popsicle. The first thing you notice is the cold. It is not just chilly, it is a damp, bone-deep cold that feels like it is actively trying to kill you. You are sleeping in a bed surrounded by heavy wool curtains, not for privacy, but to create a tiny pocket of air that your body heat can actually warm. The moment you stick your hand out of those curtains, the temperature drops 20 degrees. Why? Because you are living in a giant pile of rocks. Stone is a terrible insulator. In the summer, the castle stays cool, which is nice for about 3 weeks. But for the other 49 weeks of the year, the stone walls absorb the cold from the outside and radiate it inward. The walls are sweating, literally. Condensation runs down the stone in little rivulets, feeding the patches of green mould that are growing in the corners of your bedroom. You decide to get up. You're wearing a linen shift and a nightcap, because sleeping without a hat in a castle is a great way to get near infection. Or just never wake up. You step onto the floor. Hollywood shows you fur rugs. Reality gives you rushes. These are dried grasses and reeds scattered across the stone floor to provide insulation. They start out green and sweet-smelling, but they are rarely changed. As the weeks go by, those rushes collect everything that falls on them. Bits of food, spilled wine, grease, mud from your boots, droppings from the dogs that sleep in your room. Erasmus, a scholar from a later era, once described the floor of a wealthy home as harbouring spittle, vomit, leakage of dogs and men, ale droppings, scraps of fish, and other abominations not to be mentioned. So as you walk across your bedroom, you aren't walking on a carpet. You're walking on a compost heap. You crave heat. You look toward the fireplace. It is massive, large enough to roast a pig. But there is a problem. The chimney technology hasn't quite been perfected yet. The draft is bad. So while the fire is roaring, half the smoke is rolling out into the room instead of going up the stack. Your eyes sting, your throat itches, you smell like a smoked ham, and you haven't even had breakfast yet. You walk to the window to get some fresh air. This is a mistake. The window is a slit in the wall called an arrow loop. It is designed to let an archer shoot out, not to let sunlight in. It has no glass. Glass is rare and expensive, so you have wooden shutters. If you open them, the freezing wind blasts in. If you close them, you're sitting in the dark at noon. Most of the time, the castle is in a state of permanent twilight. You live by candlelight, straining your eyes, bumping into furniture, and trying not to trip over the dogs. And the silence? There is no silence. A castle is not a quiet home. It is a garrison. Imagine living in a house with 300 other people, most of whom are soldiers, servants, or livestock. Right below your bedroom window is the bailey, the courtyard. At dawn, the blacksmith starts hammering. The armourers are grinding swords, the horses are being shoed, the pigs are squealing, the soldiers are drilling, shouting commands and clashing wooden practice swords. The walls of the castle amplify the sound, trapping it in the courtyard and bouncing it straight into your window. You try to find a moment of peace. You sit on the edge of your bed. But you're not alone. Privacy is a modern invention. In a castle, you are never, ever alone. You sleep in the solar, the Lord's private room, but private is a relative term. Your personal servants sleep on the floor at the foot of your bed. Your bodyguards are outside the door. If you are high-ranking enough, you might have a groom of the stool, a man whose entire job is to help you go to the bathroom. Speaking of which, you need to go. You head to the guardrobe. This is the castle toilet. It is a small alcove built into the thickness of the wall. There is a stone bench with a hole in it. The hole opens directly into the open air, dropping your waist down the side of the castle wall and into the moat or a cesspit below. In the winter, the wind shoots up that hole like a frosty geyser. It is the coldest seat on earth. And in the summer, the smell from the pile below wafts up, filling your private chamber with the scent of raw sewage. People used to hang their clothes in the garderobe because they believed the ammonia fumes from the waste would kill the fleas in the fabric. Think about that. The smell was so bad it was used as a pesticide. You finish your business, wipe with a handful of hay or a rag if you're rich, and head back into the gloom. You're hungry. You want breakfast. But there is no kitchen in your apartment. The kitchen is a separate building far away to prevent the whole castle from burning down. So, by the time the servants bring your food to you, winding through the drafty corridors and up the spiral staircases, it is lukewarm. You sit down to eat. Bread, ale, maybe some cold meat left over from last night. The bread is gritty because the millstone grinds dust into the flour. The ale is weak. The meat is heavily salted to keep it from rotting. As you chew, you look around your luxurious home. The tapestries on the walls are moving, not because of ghosts, but because of the rats running behind them. The dampness is making your joints ache. The smoke is making you cough. And you realize something terrifying. This is the best life available. You are the 1%. You are the envy of the entire countryside. The peasants in the mud huts look up at your stone walls and dream of trading places with you, if only they knew. Living in a castle isn't about luxury. It is about survival. It is about enduring the cold, the smell, and the noise, because the alternative is being unprotected in a world full of Vikings, bandits, and rival lords who want to burn your house down. But the day is just beginning, and if you think the morning routine was rough, wait until you have to deal with the castle's most dangerous feature. Not the dungeon, not the enemy army, the stairs. You leave your freezing bedroom and head for the stairs. In a modern house, stairs are just a way to get from the first floor to the second. In a castle, the stairs are a weapon. You step onto the spiral staircase. It is tight, dark, and claustrophobic. It winds clockwise. This is not an aesthetic choice. It is a calculated military tactic. If an enemy attacks you, they have to fight their way up. Since most people are right-handed, the central pillar of the staircase blocks their sword arm. They can't swing. You, standing above them, have the wide part of the stairs and plenty of room to hack them to pieces. Genius for defense. Absolute misery for getting a cup of water. You're walking down, which means you don't have the sword arm advantage, but you do have the trip step to worry about. Medieval masons sometimes built specific steps with uneven heights. One step is 6 inches, the next is 9. The locals, you, learn the rhythm of the stairs through muscle memory. An invader, running up in the dark, trips and breaks his neck, but you haven't slept well. You're wearing leather slippers with 0 grip. The stone is slick with condensation. You miss a step. You stumble. There is no handrail, just a damp stone rope carved into the wall that is too slippery to hold. You catch yourself just before you tumble 40 feet down a stone corkscrew. This is your daily commute. Every time you want to leave your room, you have to navigate a vertical obstacle course designed to kill people. You finally reach the bottom and enter the Great Hall. This is the heart of the castle. In movies, the Great Hall is empty, echoing and solemn. In reality, it is the most crowded room you have ever seen. It is the living room, dining room, office and bedroom for about 50 people. The air here is thick. There is a massive central hearth, a fire pit in the middle of the floor. Again, no chimney. The smoke drifts up into the high rafters, where it hangs like a grey blanket. It coats the beautiful timber roof in black soot. It coats you in black soot. If you look closely at medieval tapestries, the people often look pale. That's partly fashion, but it's partly because they lived in a permanent fog of wood smoke. The hall is loud. Everyone is here. The steward is yelling at the servants. The bailiff is arguing with a tenant farmer about grain quotas. The dogs, huge hunting mastiffs, are fighting over a bone in the corner. There is no privacy. If you want to have a conversation, you have to shout. And it is dark. The windows are high up, stained glass if you are very rich, or just shuttered holes if you aren't. Stained glass is beautiful, but it blocks a lot of light. So even at midday, the Great Hall feels like the inside of a cathedral during a thunderstorm. You sit on your chair, it is the only chair, everyone else sits on benches. This is where the term chairman comes from. You are the chairman because you own the furniture. You look at the walls, they are painted. We think of castles as bare stone, but that's because the paint wore off centuries ago. In 1250, the walls are garish, bright reds, yellows and greens. geometric patterns, murals of battles, biblical scenes. It isn't tasteful minimalism, it is medieval maximalism. It looks like a kaleidoscope exploded. But you can't admire the art because you are distracted by the smell coming from the corner. The castle has a water problem. A castle is usually built on a hill for defence, or a cliff. Water, unfortunately, likes to be at the bottom of hills. Getting water up to the castle is a logistical nightmare. You have a well in the courtyard. It is deep, maybe 100 feet, maybe 300. Drawing a single bucket of water takes muscle. It takes time. And that bucket has to supply the kitchen, the laundry, the cleaning and the drinking. Water is precious. You don't waste it on washing the floor, you don't waste it on washing yourself. But sometimes the well runs dry, or during a siege, the enemy poisons the groundwater. So you have cisterns, giant tanks on the roof to catch rainwater. Rainwater sounds clean. But remember what else is on the roof. Birds. Lots of birds. Their droppings wash into the cistern. The water sits there, stagnant, collecting algae and dead insects. This is what you drink when the ale runs out. You decide you are thirsty, but not that thirsty. You walk out of the great hall and into the inner bailey. The sunlight hits you, and for a second it feels nice. Then you look down. The courtyard is not paved with nice flat stones. It is packed earth, and because it rained yesterday it is a quagmire of mud. But it's not just mud. This is where the horses stand. This is where the chickens scratch. This is where the pigs root. You are walking through a barnyard. To get from your bedroom to the chapel, you have to wade through ankle-deep muck. You lift the hem of your expensive velvet robe, but it's no use. The mud splatters everything. This is why medieval shoes, pattens, had wooden platforms on the bottom to elevate your feet above the sludge. You make your way to the kitchen. The kitchen is usually a separate building, often made of stone to prevent fire. You walk in, and the heat hits you like a hammer. If your bedroom was a freezer, the kitchen is an inferno. There are 3 massive fireplaces roaring, spits are turning, cauldrons are boiling. It is 100 degrees in here. The cooks are sweating. They aren't wearing much clothing because of the heat. They're shouting, chopping and throwing things. The hygiene here is questionable. There are cats everywhere to catch the mice, but the cats also walk on the tables. The dogs wander in to lick the drippings from the roasting meat. The scullions, the lowest kitchen workers, are scrubbing pots with sand and vinegar. They sleep on the floor of the kitchen because it's the warmest place in the castle. You see the food being prepared for dinner. A subtlety is being made. This is a sculpture made of sugar paste and jelly. It is shaped like a fortress. The cook is painting it with edible gold leaf. It looks magnificent. But then you see the cook taste the sauce with his finger, wipe his finger on his apron, and go back to stirring. You see a fly land on the roast pork. The cook swats it away, but the fly has already done its work. You leave the kitchen before you lose your appetite entirely. You head toward the outer wall. You want to see the view. You climb the ramparts. This is the wall walk. From here you can see for miles. It is beautiful. The green fields, the peasant villages with smoke curling from their chimneys, the river winding through the valley. But then you look down at the moat. The moat is not a shimmering blue ring of water with lilies. It is a stagnant ditch. It is the castle's garbage disposal. Everything goes into the moat. The waste from the guardrobes falls into it. The kitchen scraps are thrown into it. Dead animals are tossed into it. In the summer, the moat bubbles. It releases a gas that smells like rotten eggs and decay. This is your water feature. It is a biological defense system. Anyone trying to swim across it would probably die of infection before they reached the wall. You stand on the wall, breathing in the fresh air from the hills, trying to ignore the stench from below, and you spot something on the horizon. Dust. A column of dust moving toward the castle. Your stomach drops. Is it a neighbour coming for dinner, or is it a neighbour coming for war? In a castle, you're always watching the horizon. You're always paranoid, because a castle isn't just a home, it is a target. The bell rings, the guards shout, the drawbridge chains rattle. It's not an attack, it's just the tax collectors returning, with wagons of grain. You exhale, you're safe, for today. But safety has a price, and that price is boredom. What do you do in a castle all day? You can't watch TV, you can't browse the internet, You can't even read a book because you own maybe 3 books and you've read them all 10 times. We are going to talk about the crushing boredom of the nobility and the violent, bizarre and dangerous ways they try to entertain themselves. Because when you are locked in a stone box for the winter, you will do anything to feel alive. You are bored. It is a profound, aching boredom that settles into your bones like the damp chill of the stone walls. It is winter. The roads are turned to mud slush. The wind is howling around the towers like a banshee with a migraine. You cannot leave the castle. You are trapped in a fortress designed to keep enemies out. But right now, it is doing a fantastic job of keeping you in. So, what do? You hunt. Hunting isn't a hobby in the Middle Ages. It is an obsession. It is the only way a nobleman can practice for war without actually starting one. You and your retinue ride out into the sleet. You are wrapped in furs, but the wet cold finds its way in. Your horse slips in the mud. The dogs are barking, a chaotic chorus of yelps and growls. This isn't a peaceful nature walk, it is a blood sport. You are chasing a boar. A wild boar is not a cute pig. It is 300 pounds of muscle and rage with razor-sharp tusks. If you miss with your spear, the boar will kill the dogs, kill your horse, and then kill you. It happens all the time. Kings have died hunting. But the adrenaline is the only thing that makes you feel alive after weeks of sitting in a drafty room. You return to the castle soaked, smelling of wet dog and horse sweat. You are freezing. You head to the great hall for the evening meal. Here is where the Hollywood image of the banquet falls apart. You picture a festive, raucous party. In reality, dinner is a minefield of social anxiety and rigid rules. You sit according to rank. The high table is raised on a dais. This is where the lord and his family sit. If you are a guest, where your place tells everyone exactly how much you are worth. Sit too close to the lord, you are arrogant. Sit too far away, you are insulted. And then there is the salt. A massive, ornate salt cellar sits in the middle of the table. If you are above the salt, you get the good food and the fresh wine. If you are below the salt, you get the dregs. You get the bread that was baked 3 days ago. You get the ale that tastes like vinegar. It is a physical manifestation of your social status, staring you in the face while you chew. You look for a plate. There isn't one. Instead, you have a trencher. This is a thick slab of stale, coarse bread. It isn't meant to be eaten. It is a disposable plate. The gravy, the grease, and the blood from the meat soak into the bread. It becomes a soggy brown sponge at the end of the meal. These trenchers are gathered up and given to the poor waiting at the castle gate. If you are hungry enough to eat your own trencher, it is a sign that you have hit rock bottom. You reach for a drink. The cup is shared. You take a sip of wine, wipe the rim with your sleeve, if you are polite, and pass it to the person next to you. You watch as they drink. You see their teeth, or lack thereof. You see the sores on their lips. Germ theory does not exist, but your survival instinct does, and it is screaming. The food itself is intense. The meat is heavily spiced, not because they love flavour, but because spices are a flex. Pepper, cinnamon, cloves, nutmeg. These come from the mystical East. They cost a fortune. Serving a dish loaded with pepper is like serving a dish wrapped in gold leaf. It says, I am rich enough to burn money. But the vegetables? Suspiciously absent. The nobility believes that raw vegetables cause disease. Fruit is viewed with distrust unless it is cooked into a paste. So your diet is meat, bread, pastry, and more meat. You are constantly constipated. Gout is a common affliction for the rich. Your joints swell up because your kidneys can't handle the sheer volume of rich, fatty food. You're literally eating yourself sick. Dinner ends. The entertainment begins. A jester leaps into the centre of the room. He's wearing bright colours and bells. He's making fun of the guests. He is crude, loud, and annoying. But here is the dark truth. The jester is often not an actor. He's often a natural fool, someone with a learning disability or mental illness who has been taken in by the Lord to be laughed at. It is cruelty masquerading as comedy. Or maybe a troubadour sings. He sings about courtly love, knights dying for ladies they can't have. It is romantic and tragic. It is also the medieval equivalent of a pop song that gets stuck in your head for 3 weeks, because you have heard it every night since October. Finally, it is time for bed. But first, you might want to bathe. Bathing in a castle is a production. It is not something you do every day. It takes hours. The servants have to haul water from the well bucket by bucket. They have to heat it over the fire in the kitchen. Then they have to carry the steaming buckets up the stairs to your chamber. They fill a wooden tub, but wood gives you splinters, so they line the tub with a linen sheet. You get in. The water is hot, which feels like a miracle. They add herbs, rose petals, chamomile, not for your skin, but to hide the smell of the room. You scrub yourself with a mixture of animal fat and ash, soap. You use a strigil to scrape off the dead skin. You feel clean for the first time in a month, but the water cools fast in the drafty room. You have to get out before you freeze. You step onto the rush-covered floor, immediately getting your clean feet dirty again. You crawl into your bed. The heavy curtains are drawn tight. You're wearing your nightcap. The castle goes quiet, but it is never silent. The wind whistles, the timbers creak, and then there are the rats. You hear them scuttling in the walls. You hear them in the thatch overhead. Rats are a constant presence. They eat your grain, they eat your candles, they chew on your clothes, and they carry the fleas that carry the plague. You don't know about the plague connection yet, but you hate them anyway. You lie in the dark, listening to the night watchman call out the hour. 10 o'clock and all is well. But is it? Because tomorrow the horizon might change. The dust cloud might appear. We have talked about the cold, the food, and the boredom. But we haven't talked about the castle's true purpose. It is a machine for war. And when war comes, the castle stops being a home. It becomes a meat grinder, siege. The word itself sounds heavy. When an army surrounds your walls, the game changes. The luxury, what little there was, vanishes. You are cut off. No food comes in. No waste goes out. We're going to talk about what happens when the food runs out, when the water turns green, when the enemy starts throwing things over the walls that are definitely not party favours. We're going to talk about dead horses, Greek fire, and the psychological horror of waiting to die while trapped in a stone box. Because if you thought living in a castle was hard, try dying in one. The siege has begun. The gates are barred. The drawbridge is raised. The portcullis, that heavy iron grate with the spiky teeth, is slammed down. You are locked in. At first, it feels safe. You look out from the high walls at the enemy army encamped below. Their tents look like little mushrooms. Their fires look like fireflies. You have stone walls 10 feet thick. You have towers. You have a well. You feel invincible. This feeling lasts about a week. Then, the reality sets in. A siege isn't a battle. It's a slow-motion suffocation. The first problem is the noise. The enemy doesn't just sit there. They build machines, trebuchets, mangonels, ballistae. Day and night, you hear the thump whoosh of a trebuchet launching a projectile. Then, seconds later, the crash as a massive stone slams into the wall. The whole castle shakes. Dust falls from the ceiling into your soup. It is a rhythmic, psychological torture. You can't sleep because you're waiting for the next impact. And then, they stop throwing stones. They start throwing other things. Dead cows, dead horses. You watch a bloated, rotting cow carcass sail over the wall and explode in the courtyard. It isn't just gross, it's biological warfare. The enemy knows that if they can fill your castle with rotting flesh, disease will follow. The flies arrive, millions of them. The smell of decomposition mixes with the smell of the unwashed garrison. And sometimes it's not animals, it's people, the heads of your messengers, or prisoners they captured. It is a message. This is what happens to people who leave. But the real enemy isn't the trebuchet, it's the water. Your well is deep, but is it infinite? With hundreds of soldiers, horses and refugees drinking from it every day, the water level drops. The water gets muddy, then it gets silty. Then people start getting sick. Dysentery, the bloody flux. You're running to the guardrobe 10 times a day, but so is everyone else. The cesspit at the bottom of the wall is overflowing. The smell is thick enough to chew. And the food? The fresh meat ran out weeks ago. The salted meat is running low. The grain is getting mouldy. You're down to pottage, that grey, gloopy stew. But now it's mostly water and hope. You start looking at the castle rats differently. They aren't pests anymore. They are lunch. While you're starving, the enemy's getting creative. They're digging. You're sitting in the great hall trying to ignore the hunger pangs when you hear it. A faint tap, tap, tap coming from beneath the floor. Sappers. They are digging a tunnel under the castle walls. They prop up the tunnel with wooden beams. Once they are under the corner tower, they will fill the tunnel with pig fat and firewood and set it on fire. The beams will burn. The tunnel will collapse. The tower will fall into the hole. You have to stop them. But how? You dig a countermine. You guess where they are and dig your own tunnel to intercept them. Imagine the horror. You're crawling on your belly in a dark, narrow tunnel, holding a candle and a dagger. Suddenly the earth in front of you crumbles. You're face to face with an enemy sapper. It is a knife fight in a coffin. No room to swing a sword. You stab, you claw, you scream in the dark while the earth shakes above you. If the tunnel collapses, you are buried alive. It is the most claustrophobic, terrifying combat imaginable. But let's say you stop the mine. The walls hold. The enemy gets frustrated. They bring up the siege tower. This is a wooden skyscraper on wheels, covered in wet animal hides to stop your fire arrows. It rolls slowly toward the wall, creaking, filled with soldiers ready to jump onto your ramparts. You're on the wall. You have one job: destroy it. You don't use arrows. They bounce off. You don't use rocks. The tower is too strong. You use Greek fire. This is the medieval napalm. A secret mixture, probably petroleum, quicklime and sulfur that burns on water. You pour it over the side. It sticks to the tower. It sticks to the men. It cannot be put out with water. It screams as it burns. The smell of burning chemicals and burning flesh fills the air. Or maybe you use heated sand. We mentioned this before, but it bears repeating. You heat sand in a giant cauldron until it is red hot. You dump it on the knights climbing the ladders. The sand gets inside their armour. It works its way into the joints. It burns the skin off. They can't get it out. They tear off their own armour in agony, exposing themselves to your archers. It is brutal. It is effective. It is war without glory. Finally, the enemy gives up. Or maybe your own side surrenders because you ate the last rat yesterday. The gates open. If you surrendered, you might be held for ransom. If you fought to the bitter end, you might be executed. But let's assume you survive. The siege is over. The castle is quiet again. But it will never be the same. The smell of death lingers in the stones. The courtyard is a graveyard. The well is poisoned. You realise that the castle wasn't a home. It was a cage. A very expensive, very strong cage, but a cage nonetheless. You leave the castle. You ride out into the countryside. You want to see something green. You want to breathe air that doesn't smell of smoke and fear. You ride past the peasant villages, and you see something strange. They are happy. The peasants are working the fields. They are dirty, yes. They are poor, yes. But they aren't trapped in a stone box waiting to die. They have the sun. They have the open road. And for a moment the lord of the castle envies the serf. But the serf has his own problems. Because while the lord was fighting knights, the serf was fighting something much older. Something that lives in the woods. We're going to talk about the medieval forest. It isn't a park. It isn't a hiking trail. It is the wilderness. The place where the laws of man stop and the laws of nature and the supernatural begin. Wolves, outlaws, fairies, and trust me, you do not want to meet any of them. You step under the canopy of the trees. The light vanishes instantly. The temperature drops. The smell changes from the sewage of the castle to something earthy, damp, and ancient. Welcome to the forest. In the modern world, the forest is a place of recreation. You go hiking, you take photos of moss, you feel at one with nature. In the Middle Ages, the forest is not a park. It is the enemy. It is the wilderness, a word that literally means place of wild beasts. It is the psychological border where civilization ends and chaos begins. First, let's talk about the law. You see a deer grazing in a clearing. Your stomach rumbles because you're hungry. You have a bow. You could shoot it. Do not shoot it. If you shoot that deer, you aren't just a hunter. You are a criminal. This is the king's forest. It doesn't mean the king visits it. It means he owns the wildlife. The deer, the boars, the rabbits, they are his property. If the foresters catch you poaching, the punishment is medieval math at its finest. Kill a deer, lose a hand, or be blinded. Or, if the king is feeling particularly strict, execution. The life of a deer is legally worth more than your life. You aren't even allowed to cut down a tree for firewood without paying a tax. If you own a dog, you have to law it, which means cutting off its claws so it can't chase the king's deer. So the forest isn't a resource for you, it is a trap. But the foresters are the least of your worries. You hear a twig snap. You freeze. Outlaws. We have a romantic image of Robin Hood, a dashing hero stealing from the rich and giving to the poor. Reality check. Outlaws are not heroes. They are desperate, violent men who have been outlawed. This is a specific legal term. It means they are outside the protection of the law. They are caput lupinum, wolf's head. This means they are legally considered wolves. Anyone can kill them. You don't need a trial. You don't need a reason. If you see an outlaw, you can cut him down like an animal, and the sheriff will probably pay you a bounty. Knowing this, the outlaws have nothing to lose. They aren't going to rob you and let you go. They're going to rob you, strip you naked, because clothes are valuable, and likely slit your throat so you can't tell the sheriff where they are. They are men with PTSD from wars, starving peasants who lost their land, and criminals fleeing the gallows. They are living in the woods, eating squirrels, and sleeping in the mud. They are not singing merry songs. They are surviving. But as terrifying as the outlaws are, they are human. You can bleed them. You can kill them. The real terror of the forest is what you can't kill. Night falls. The darkness in the woods is absolute. You can't see the path. You hear rustling. Is it a wolf? Wolves in the Middle Ages aren't shy. They hunt in packs. In deep winter, they enter villages and snatch children. The big bad wolf wasn't a fairy tale, it was a public safety warning. But maybe it's not a wolf. Maybe it's the fair folk. Forget Tinkerbell. Forget the cute little wings. The medieval fairy is a sociopath. They are the good neighbours, a name used to flatter them so they don't hurt you. They live in the hollow hills. If you step into a fairy ring, a circle of mushrooms, you might be trapped dancing until you die of exhaustion. Or you might think you've been gone for an hour, but when you step out, 100 years have passed and everyone you love is dead. They steal babies. The changeling myth terrified mothers. If your baby suddenly became sick, or quiet, or strange, people believed the fairies had stolen the real baby and replaced it with a block of wood that looked like a child, or an old fairy in disguise. Imagine the horror of looking at your sick child and wondering if it is a monster. You see a light bobbing in the distance, a lantern, a cottage. No, it is will-o'-the-wisp, ignis fatuus, fool's fire. It is swamp gas igniting. But you don't know that. You think it is a spirit leading you to safety. You follow it. It leads you off the path deeper into the marsh until you step into a bog and sink. You drown in the dark, lured by a ghost. You run. You scramble through the brambles, tearing your clothes, bleeding. You just want to see a light. A real light. And then you see it. Smoke. A chimney. A village. You stumble out of the tree line. You're safe. You're back in civilization. But are you? Because the village has its own dangers, and the biggest one is right there, next to the barber shop. We are going to talk about the village doctor. Or, more accurately, the guy who owns a knife and a book he can't read. You have a toothache from all that gritty bread. Or maybe you have a fever from sleeping in a damp castle. You need help. You walk into the barber surgeon's shop. The red and white pole outside symbolises blood and bandages. It isn't a candy cane, it is a warning. Inside it smells of old blood, unwashed bodies, and herbs that are trying and failing to cover the stench. The doctor sits you down. He doesn't wash his hands. Why would he? Germs haven't been invented yet. He wipes his knife on his apron, which is stiff with the dried fluids of the last 50 patients. You have demons in your teeth, he says. This is the tooth worm. People believe that cavities were caused by a tiny worm living inside the tooth, gnawing its way out. The cure? He might heat a needle until it glows red and jam it into the cavity to kill the worm. Or he might strap you to a chair and yank the tooth out with a pair of iron pliers that look like they belong in a blacksmith's forge. There is no anaesthesia. Maybe a swig of strong wine if you can pay for it. Otherwise he just says, hold still, and 4 strong men hold you down. The sound of the tooth cracking, the taste of iron, the pain that blinds you. But that's minor surgery. What if you have something internal? Kidney stones, the cutting for stone. It is one of the oldest surgeries in history, and it is horrific. The doctor inserts a metal tool. Well, let's just say he inserts it. He finds the stone. Then he cuts into you from the outside, through the perineum to dig the stone out. You are awake for this. If you don't die of shock, you will almost certainly die of infection. And if you survive the surgery, you have to survive the cure. Medieval medicine is based on the 4 humours: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, black bile. If you're sick, you are out of balance. Too much blood, leeches, or bloodletting. He cuts a vein and drains a pint of your life force into a bowl. You feel dizzy. He says, it's working. Too much bile? He He gives you an emetic, a poison that makes you vomit violently until you're empty. Or maybe he prescribes mummy powder. Yes, ground up ancient Egyptians. Or usnea, moss scraped from the skull of a hanged man. You're literally eating the dead to stay alive. You realise that in the medieval world, the cure is often worse than the disease. You stumble out of the doctor's shop, missing a tooth, bleeding from the arm and holding a packet of moss. You need a drink. You head to the tavern. But the tavern isn't just a bar. It is the news network. It is the courthouse. It is the wrestling ring. And tonight there is a stranger in the corner. He is telling a story about a new invention, something that is going to change the world, something loud. We are going to talk about gunpowder, and how a black powder from the east turned the invincible knight in shining armour into a tin can filled with holes. The era of the sword is ending. The era of the boom is beginning. You're sitting in the tavern, nursing your aching jaw, when a loud bang shakes the dust from the rafters. The room goes silent. Outside, in the muddy courtyard, a group of mercenaries is testing a new toy. It looks like a metal pot attached to a stick. It is called a hand-gonze. It is the grandfather of the gun. It is crude. It is heavy. It takes a full minute to reload. You have to light it with a match, a slow-burning cord. Half the time it doesn't fire. The other half, it explodes in your hand, taking your fingers with it. But when it works, it changes everything. For 1,000 years the knight ruled the battlefield. He was a tank. He spent a fortune on armour, a fortune on a warhorse, and 20 years training to use a lance. He was unstoppable. A peasant with a pitchfork didn't stand a chance. But now, you watch a scrawny mercenary aim the handguns at an old breastplate propped up on a fence. Boom! Smoke fills the air. It smells of sulphur, the smell of hell. When the smoke clears, there is a hole in the breastplate. The knight is obsolete. A peasant with 2 weeks of training and a cheap metal tube can kill a lord who spent his whole life preparing for war. It is the democratization of violence. The aristocracy hates it. They call it cowardly, they call it unchristian, but they can't stop it. The castle too is doomed. Those high stone walls were designed to stop arrows and ladders, but now cannons are arriving. Massive bronze beasts like the Monsmeg or the Dardanelles gun. They fire stone balls weighing hundreds of pounds. You hit a castle wall with a cannonball, and the stone doesn't just crack, it shatters. The walls that protected you for centuries are now just expensive rubble waiting to happen. The world is getting louder. The clash of swords is being replaced by the thunder of powder. But while the soldiers are playing with fire, the monks are playing with time. You leave the tavern and walk toward the monastery. You hear a sound, clang, clang, clang. It isn't a bell ringing randomly. It is steady, rhythmic, mechanical. It is the clock. Before this moment, time was fluid. An hour in the summer was long because the day was long. An hour in the winter was short. Time was measured by the sun and the prayer. I'll meet you at Vespers, but the mechanical clock doesn't care about the sun. It chops time into equal rigid slices. Tick, tock. Suddenly, time is money. Merchants start paying workers by the hour. If you're late, you're fined. The clock tower rises in the town square, a mechanical overseer watching your every move. You're no longer living in nature's time, you're living in machine time. You walk past the monastery scriptorium. Inside, monks are hunched over parchment, copying Bibles by hand. It takes a year to make one book. Books are so valuable they are chained to the shelves. But down the street in a dusty workshop, a man named Gutenberg is covered in ink. He is arranging tiny metal letters in a frame. Clunk. He pulls a lever. A sheet of paper comes out. Perfect. Clunk. Another one. The printing press. Information, once locked in the ivory towers of the church, is about to flood the streets. Pamphlets, news, heresy, science. You realise you're standing at the edge of a cliff. The Middle Ages are ending. The modern world is rushing toward you like a train, though you don't know what a train is yet. But before we jump into the future, let's go back to the most intimate, dangerous place in the medieval world. The bedroom. Not for sleep, for birth. If war is the realm of men, childbirth is the battlefield of women, and the casualty rate is higher than any crusade. You are a queen, you are pregnant. This should be happy news. Instead, it is a national crisis. You enter your confinement. A month before the due date, you're locked in a room. The windows are sealed with heavy tapestries to block out light and fresh air, which might carry demons. The room is lit only by candles. It is hot, stuffy, and crowded with female relatives, midwives, and ladies in waiting. You will not leave this room until the baby is born, or until you are dead. The pressure is crushing. The king needs an heir, a boy. If you have a girl, you have failed. If the baby dies, you have failed. If you die, well, the king will just marry again. Labour begins. There is no epidural. There is no sterile equipment. The midwife has herbs, amulets, and prayer. She might tie a birth girdle, a strip of parchment with holy words written on it, around your belly. If things go wrong, the options are grim. There are no C-sections that survive the mother. If the baby is stuck, the surgeons are called. They bring hooks. It is a horror show that we won't describe in detail, but it haunts the nightmares of every woman in the kingdom. But let's say you survive. You have a son. The bells ring. The fountains run with wine. You are a hero, for now, until the next pregnancy. You look at your baby. He's swaddled tight like a little mummy so his limbs grow straight. He's handed to a wet nurse because a queen does not breastfeed. And you wonder, what kind of world will he grow up in? Will he die of the plague before he is 5? Will he be killed by a cannonball? Will he burn in a religious war fueled by printed pamphlets? You don't know. You just close your eyes and listen to the clock ticking in the square. Tick, tock. Time is moving faster now, but there is one group of people who are trying to stop time, or at least cheat it, the alchemists. They are in the basements, boiling mercury and sulphur, trying to find the philosopher's stone. They want to turn lead into gold. They want to brew the elixir of life. They are the mad scientists of the era. They poison themselves with fumes. They blow up their labs. The church calls them sorcerers. But in their madness, they are inventing chemistry. They are discovering phosphorus. They are distilling alcohol, aqua vitae, water of life. They fail to find eternal life, but they find something else. They find the scientific method. Test, observe, repeat. And that method is going to kill the superstition that rules your life. But not yet. Right now, you are still afraid of the dark. You are still afraid of the witch down the lane. So you go to the only place that offers protection. The cathedral. You walk in. It is massive. The ceiling soars to heaven. The stained glass glows like jewels. The incense smells like paradise. For a peasant who lives in a mud hut, this is a spaceship. It is technology beyond comprehension. How does the stone stay up? How does the glass glow? It is designed to make you feel small, and it works. You kneel. You pray. You buy a relic, a splinter of the true cross, or a vial of the Virgin Mary's milk. There are enough splinters of the cross in Europe to build a ship, but you don't know that. You find comfort here, in the stone, in the chant, but outside the wind is howling, the winter is coming, and the harvest was bad this year. You walk home, you bar the door, you bank the fire, you're tired, your bones ache, your teeth hurt, but you are alive. And in the Middle Ages, that is the only victory that matters. So as you lay your head on your straw pillow listening to the rats in the thatch, you make a plan for tomorrow. Survive. Just survive. Sleep well. So you have survived the castle, the forest, and the doctor. You have managed to avoid being eaten by a wolf or poisoned by lead makeup. But now, you are bored. You want adventure. You want to see the world. You decide to go to sea. In the modern world, a sea voyage is a vacation. You sit by the pool, drink a cocktail and watch the sunset. In the Middle Ages, a sea voyage is a prison sentence that you pay for. You walk down to the docks. You smell the sea air, salt, tar and rotting fish. You see your ship. It is a cog. It looks less like a sleek vessel and more like a walnut shell bobbing in a washing machine. It is round, tubby and has a single square sail. You pay the captain. He takes your coins and points to the hold. Find a spot. There are no cabins. There are no bunks. You're sleeping in the cargo hold on top of sacks of wool, barrels of wine and 50 other passengers who haven't washed in a month. The ship pushes off. The horror begins immediately. The motion of a medieval cog is not a gentle sway. It is a violent corkscrew lurching. Within an hour, everyone in the hold is seasick. There are no bathrooms. There is a bucket in the corner, but the ship is moving too much to reach it. So the floor of the hold quickly becomes a slurry of vomit, and you are sleeping in it. But the real enemy isn't the motion. It is the water. You're surrounded by the ocean, but you cannot drink a drop. The fresh water is stored in wooden barrels. After a week, the water goes green. It grows algae. It smells like a swamp. You have to hold your nose to drink it. or you mix it with vinegar to kill the taste. And the food? Welcome to the world of hardtack. This is a biscuit made of flour and water, baked 4 times until it is as hard as a brick. It is so hard you could build a house with it. You have to soak it in water, ale, or soup just to bite it without breaking your teeth. But you aren't the only one eating the hardtack. The weevils are hungry too. After a few weeks at sea, the biscuits are infested with beetle larvae. The sailors call them worm castles. You have 2 choices. Eat the biscuit in the dark so you can't see the maggots, or tap the biscuit on the table to knock them out. Experienced sailors tap. Starving sailors just chew. And then your body starts to fall apart. Scurvy. We mentioned it briefly before, but let's really look at it. You are vitamin C deficient. Your body literally forgets how to hold itself together. The collagen in your body breaks down. Your gums swell up like purple sponges. They grow over your teeth. Your teeth loosen and fall out. But the terrifying part is the old wounds. Remember that cut you got on your knee when you were 7? It healed. It's been a scar for 20 years. But when you have scurvy, the scar tissue dissolves. The wound opens up again. It starts bleeding as if you just cut it. Broken bones that healed years ago snap again. You are literally unhealing. And the psychological toll? Scurvy causes fatal nostalgia. Sailors would hallucinate. They would smell the green grass of home. They would hear church bells ringing underwater. They would weep uncontrollably. Some would jump overboard, thinking the green ocean was a meadow. But let's say you survive the voyage. You land. Where are you? The Holy Land. You aren't just a traveller. You are a crusader. You have marched thousands of miles to fight for Jerusalem. You expect glory. You expect to look cool in your armour. Reality check. You are wearing 60 pounds of chainmail in the middle of a desert. The sun is a hammer. The metal of your armour heats up until it burns your skin. You are cooking inside your own suit. Heatstroke kills more crusaders than the Saracens do, and there is no water. The enemy, led by Saladin, is smart. They poison the wells. They block the oasis. You're marching through dust. Your lips are cracked. Your tongue is swollen. You would trade your sword, your horse, and your soul for a single cup of green barrel water from the ship. And then the flux hits. Dysentery. It is the great killer of armies. You are marching in a column with thousands of other men. There are no latrines. Men are relieving themselves as they walk. The dust is mixed with dried feces. You breathe it in. You eat it with your food. You get sick. Violently sick. You can't stop. You dehydrate. You collapse. King Richard the Lionheart, the great hero of the Third. Crusade? He spent most of his time being carried on a litter because he was too sick to ride a horse. He was shooting crossbows at the enemy while lying in bed shivering with fever. That is the reality of medieval warfare. It isn't a duel, it is a hospital ward on the move. But maybe you survive the crusade. You get on a ship. You go home. You bring something back with you. Not gold, not glory, spice. You have tasted pepper. You have tasted cinnamon. You have tasted sugar. And you are addicted. Back in your cold, grey castle in England or France, the food tastes bland. You crave the heat of the East. This craving is going to change the world, because you aren't the only one. The entire aristocracy of Europe is now hooked on spices. They need them. They will pay anything for them. Pepper is worth its weight in gold. A pocketful of nutmeg can buy a farm. This demand creates a new class of people, the merchants. Before this, society was simple. Those who fight, nobles, those who pray, clergy, and those who work, peasants. But now, there is a guy who just buys and sells stuff, and he is getting richer than the king. He builds a house in the city, he wears velvet, he eats better than you do, and the nobles hate him. They pass sumptuary laws. These are laws about fashion. No merchant can wear ermine fur. No peasant can wear pointed shoes longer than 2 inches. They are trying to stop the world from changing. They want to know who is who just by looking at their clothes. But it's too late. Money is becoming more powerful than blood. You're witnessing the birth of capitalism, and it smells like nutmeg and dead sailors. But let's step out of the counting house and go back to the street, because while the merchants are getting rich, the city is getting crowded, and crowded cities have a new problem: trash. We talked about the muck. But let's talk about the sheer volume of garbage. You're in London, there are 40,000 people, there is no landfill. What do you do with your broken pot? You throw it in the street. What do you do with the bones from dinner? Street. What do you do with the dead cat? Street. The street level is literally rising. Archaeologists call this urban stratigraphy. The ground level of a city goes up by a foot every century, just from the accumulation of packed filth. You're walking on the compressed trash of your ancestors, and the smell attracts the rakers. These are men paid to rake the muck, but they can't keep up. So the city passes laws. You must clean the street in front of your own house. Nobody does it, so the pigs do it. London had free-roaming pigs. They were the garbage trucks. But pigs are dangerous. They bite children. They trip horses. There is a record of a man in France who was killed by a pig. The pig was arrested. Yes, arrested. We're going to talk about animal trials. This is not a joke. In the Middle Ages, if an animal committed a crime, it was put on trial, with a lawyer and a judge. A pig eats a child. The pig is taken to jail. It is charged with murder. A lawyer is appointed to defend the pig. He argues, "My client is a pig. He did not know it was wrong." The prosecutor argues, "The pig was possessed by the devil." The judge listens. He sentences the pig to death. The pig is dressed in human clothes, a shirt and breeches, and hanged in the town square. Why? Because medieval people believed in order. Everything had a place in God's universe. If a pig kills a human, it has broken the natural order. It must be punished to restore balance. They put weevils on trial for eating the crops. The bishop would excommunicate a swarm of locusts. He would stand in the field and shout, "I command you to leave." If the locusts left, miracle. If they stayed, the people are too sinful. The locusts are God's punishment. It was a legal system trying to make sense of a chaotic world, but the chaos wasn't just coming from nature, it was coming from the sky. Let's talk about the weather. We worry about climate change today, but the medieval world had its own climate disaster. The Little Ice Age. Around 1300 the world got cold. The glaciers expanded, the summers turned wet and grey, the crops failed, the Great Famine of 1315. It rained for months. The wheat rotted in the fields. There was no bread. You are a peasant. You are hungry. You eat your seed grain, the grain you are saving to plant next year. This is eating your future. You eat the cats. You eat the dogs. And then the stories start. Whispers of Hansel and Gretel. Parents taking their children into the woods and leaving them there because they can't feed them. It isn't a fairy tale. It is a news report. Cannibalism in the prisons. Thieves stealing hanged men from the gallows to eat. It was a slow-motion apocalypse, and everyone believed it was because God was angry. They prayed. They walked in processions, barefoot, whipping themselves. But the rain didn't stop. This broke something in the medieval mind. The contract was, we pray, God protects us. But God wasn't protecting them. This doubt is what opens the door for the Renaissance. If praying doesn't work, maybe we should try engineering? Maybe we should try medicine? Hunger is the mother of invention. But before we get to the invention, we have to survive the night. And tonight, you're not sleeping in a castle. You're sleeping in an inn, the Tabard Inn, or the Prancing Pony. It sounds cosy. A warm fire, a mug of ale. But the medieval inn is a trap. You walk in. The landlord looks at your boots. He's calculating how much money you have. He gives you a bed. But the bed has a special feature, a trap door. There are legends and court records of innkeepers who built beds over trapdoors. You go to sleep. In the middle of the night, a lever is pulled. The bed tips. You fall into the cellar, into a vat of boiling water. The innkeeper makes you into meat pies. Sweeney Todd wasn't the first. This fear, the fear of this demon barber or the murderous innkeeper, is deep in the medieval psyche. It is the fear of the stranger, the fear of travel. So, you don't sleep. You push the dresser in front of the door. You keep your dagger under your pillow, and you listen. You hear footsteps in the hall. Is it the landlord? Is it a thief? Or is it something worse? Is it the sin-eater? This is a person, usually a beggar, who is paid to eat a meal over a dead body. By eating the bread and drinking the wine, he eats the sins of the dead person, allowing them to go to heaven. He takes the sins into his own soul. He's a spiritual garbage disposal. The village hates him. They throw rocks at him, but they need him. Because everyone has sins, and everyone is afraid of the dark. So as you lie in your barricaded room, listening to the creaking floorboards, you realise that the medieval world is a place where everything has a price. Bread cost a penny, silk cost a fortune. But salvation cost a meal eaten over a corpse. And survival cost everything you have. So, you have survived the siege, the rats, and the monotony of castle life. You have eaten the stale trencher bread and drank the watery ale. Now you have a very important job to do. You have to look the part. You are a noble, after all. And in the Middle Ages, fashion isn't just about looking good. It is a legal requirement. We are going to talk about the torture of getting dressed. You wake up shivering as usual. Your servants arrive to dress you. You don't just slip on a t-shirt. You are constructed. If you are a man, you start with the braise, baggy linen underwear that bunch up and chafe. Then come the hose. These aren't pants. They are two separate woolen tubes, one for each leg, that you have to tie to your belt. If the knot comes loose, your pants literally fall off one leg at a time. This happens more often than knights like to admit. Then comes the tunic. Wool. Always wool. Heavy, scratchy and hot. Over that, a surcoat. Maybe lined with fur if it's winter. But the real nightmare is the shoes. It is the 14th century and the trend is Krakows or poulaines. These are shoes with impossibly long pointed toes. Some are so long, 6 inches, 10 inches, even 20 inches, that they have to be stuffed with moss to keep their shape. Or worse, tied back to your knees with a little chain so you don't trip over your own feet. Walking in them is an ordeal. You have to high step like a heron. Running is impossible. If you are attacked while wearing your fancy shoes, you're dead. But you wear them because the king wears them, and because the church hates them. The church called them claws of demons, and said they prevented men from kneeling in prayer. This only made them more popular. If you are a woman, the situation is tighter. Literally. You are laced into a bodice. It isn't a corset yet, but it is stiff and unyielding. You wear layers of linen and wool that weigh 20 pounds. You can barely lift your arms. And then, the headdress, the hennin, a giant cone that sticks up from your head, sometimes 2 feet high, with a veil draping down. You have to duck to get through doorways. If a gust of wind catches it, it snaps your neck back. You are balancing a tower on your skull all day long. But fashion isn't just uncomfortable, it is policed. These are the sumptuary laws. The king decides who can wear what. Only a duke can wear ermine fur. Only a knight can wear velvet. No peasant may wear the colour purple. Why? Because the nobles are terrified of the merchants. The merchants are getting rich. They can afford velvet, but the nobles want to know at a glance who is better than whom. If you are a wealthy merchant and you wear a coat that is too short, showing off your legs was considered very racy, or too purple, the sheriff will arrest you. He will strip the clothes off your back in the middle of the street and fine you. Fashion police were real, and they carried swords. But let's say you are dressed. You look magnificent and ridiculous. What do you do now? You go to the tournament. In movies, the tournament is a romantic sporting event. Knights jousting for a lady's favour, flags waving. In reality, a tournament is a riot with horses. You are a spectator. You sit in a wooden stand that was built yesterday. It creaks. Sometimes it collapses, killing hundreds of people. This happened in London in 1331. Queen Philippa fell but survived. The carpenters were almost executed. You watch the joust. 2 men riding at each other at 30 miles per hour holding wooden poles tipped with iron. When the lance hits, it doesn't just break, it explodes. Splinters fly into the crowd. Splinters fly into the knight's eyes. King Henry II of France died this way. A splinter went through his visor and into his brain. It is violent. It is loud. The ground shakes. But the joust is the tame part. The real event is the melee. This is where they split the knights into 2 teams and say, "Go!" It is a mock battle. But the weapons are real. The swords are blunted, but a blunted iron bar hitting your head still cracks your skull. The horses bite. Men get trampled. There are no referees. Knights gang up on each other. They aim for the ransom. If you knock a knight down, you capture him. He has to pay you to get his horse and armour back. It is organised mugging. Knights died in tournaments all the time, but it was the only way to get rich and famous. It was the NFL, the UFC, and the stock market rolled into one bloody afternoon. And while the men are bashing each other's brains out, the ladies are engaging in their own dangerous game. Courtly love. We talked about this before, but in the castle, It is a pressure cooker. You are a queen. A young knight wears your favour, a sleeve ripped from your dress. He fights for you. He writes you poems. It seems romantic, but it is a trap. Your husband, the king, is watching. The bishop is watching. The spies are watching. If you smile too much at the knight, treason. If you don't smile enough, you're cold and uncourtly. You're walking a tightrope. One slip and you end up in a convent, or the tower. But the tournament ends. The feast is over. The night falls. And now the castle gets quiet. And when it gets quiet, the lord gets paranoid. He goes to his treasury. This isn't a bank. It is a heavy oak chest at the foot of his bed. It has 3 locks. He keeps the keys on his belt. He never takes the belt off. Inside the chest is his life. Gold coins, silver plates, and documents. In the Middle Ages, a piece of paper is worth more than a castle, a charter, a deed, a will. If the castle burns down, he can rebuild. If he loses the piece of parchment that says, "I own this land," he is nothing. Forgery is rampant. Monks are the best forgers. They have the ink, the parchment, and the handwriting skills. A monastery might discover an old document that says, "Actually, this village belongs to us, not the Lord." So the Lord lives in fear of ink. But there is one person in the castle who isn't afraid of ink, or fire, or gold: the alchemist. Every ambitious lord has one tucked away in a tower basement. You walk down the spiral stairs, past the dungeon, into a room that smells of sulphur, mercury, and desperation. The alchemist is a man with burned eyebrows and stained fingers. He is surrounded by glass alembics, retorts, and bubbling crucibles. He is trying to do the impossible. He is trying to transmute base metals into gold. He tells the Lord, "I just need a little more funding. I am so close." He is lying, or he is deluded, probably both. He mixes quicksilver, mercury, with salt and vinegar. He heats it. The fumes are toxic. He is slowly poisoning himself. He goes mad from mercury poisoning, the origin of the Mad Hatter. But in his madness he discovers things. He discovers aqua regia, an acid that can dissolve gold. He discovers phosphorus, which glows in the dark. Imagine being a medieval peasant and seeing a man holding a glowing green rock. You would think he was a wizard. The alchemist walks a fine line. If he succeeds, or fakes it well enough, he is rich. If the Lord realizes he is being scammed, there were iron gibbets made specifically for alchemists. They would hang them in tinsel robes as a joke. But the greatest alchemy in the castle wasn't turning lead into gold. It was turning food into poison. We have to talk about the lead. It wasn't just in the makeup, it was in the cups, pewter. The plates and goblets of the rich were made of pewter. Pewter is an alloy of tin and lead. When you drink acidic wine from a pewter goblet, the lead leaches out. You're drinking a neurotoxin with every meal. And the glaze on the pottery? Lead. The pipes in the walls, if you were lucky enough to have plumbing? Lead. The aristocracy was slowly, systematically lowering their own IQ and destroying their nervous systems. This might explain some of the erratic behaviour of medieval kings. They weren't just tyrants, they were heavily metal-poisoned tyrants. But let's leave the poison and go to the one place in the castle that was supposed to be safe, the chapel. Every castle has one. It is beautiful. Stained glass. Incense. You go there to pray, but you also go there to see the relics. The Lord has bought a finger bone of St. George, or a splinter of the True Cross, or a vial of the Virgin Mary's milk. He paid a fortune for these. He keeps them in a golden box encrusted with jewels. Why? Because they are spiritual insurance. In the medieval mind, God is a feudal lord. If you want a favour, salvation, you need a connection. The saint is the connection. The relic is the phone line. You kneel before the bone. You kiss the glass case. You believe with absolute certainty that this dead body part can cure your gout, save your soul, or stop the Vikings from attacking. It is a world where the physical and the spiritual are mashed together. Magic is real. Miracles are expected. But there is a dark side to the chapel. Sanctuary. If a criminal, a murderer, a thief, can run into the chapel and touch the altar, the sheriff cannot arrest him. He is under God's protection. He can stay there for 40 days. The sheriff has to surround the church and wait. It is a standoff. The criminal sits inside eating food brought by sympathetic priests. The sheriff sits outside sharpening his sword. After 40 days, the criminal has a choice: surrender and stand trial, or abjure the realm. This means he confesses his crime, dresses in a white tunic, carries a wooden cross, and walks barefoot to the nearest port. He has to leave England forever. If he strays from the road, anyone can kill him. It is a grim parade. A murderer walking alone to the sea, carrying his own exile. You watch him go from the castle wall, you're glad it isn't you. But as you turn back to the courtyard, you hear a rumble. Not thunder, not a siege engine, the wall itself. Castles are heavy. They are built on dirt. Sometimes the architects didn't dig deep enough. You see a crack appear in the masonry. It widens, dust falls. A castle doesn't always die in war. Sometimes it just falls down. You realise that even the stone is temporary, and as the sun sets on another day of survival, you retreat to your freezing room, crawl into your curtained bed, and pray that the rats don't bite your toes tonight. Because tomorrow is laundry day. And in the Middle Ages, laundry day is dangerous. So you've survived the night in your freezing bed. Now you need clean clothes. In the modern world, this means pressing a button on a machine. In a medieval castle, laundry day is not a chore. It is a chemical hazard event that happens maybe twice a year. We're going to talk about the Great Wash. You don't wash your outer clothes, the wool and velvet. You just brush the dried mud off those and hope the smoke covers the smell. But your linens, your undershirts, your sheets, your tablecloths, they need to be white. And to get them white, you need chemistry. The washerwomen take over the courtyard. They set up massive wooden tubs. They boil water over open fires. The steam mixes with the cold air, creating a fog bank that smells sharp. Why sharp? Because of the soap. They use lye. This is made by soaking wood ash in water. It is caustic. If you get it in your eyes, you're blind. If you leave it on your hands too long, your skin dissolves. The washerwomen have hands that are red, raw and scarred. But lye isn't enough for the tough stains. For that, you need, once again, urine. We keep coming back to this fluid, but it was the Windex of the Middle Ages. The ammonia in stale urine acts as a bleach. The washerwomen soak the fine linen sheets in vats of pee. Then they stomp on them with their bare feet. So, when you slip into your fresh bedsheets that night, remember, they are clean because someone stomped on them in a bucket of waste. The smell of lavender they scatter in the chest isn't just perfume. It is a desperate attempt to mask the smell of the cleaning process. But the laundry isn't the only thing smelling up the courtyard. Let's talk about your pets. In a modern home, a pet is a companion. In a castle, an animal is a tool that eats. You have dogs. But these aren't golden retrievers. These are alaunts, or mastiffs. They are bred for war and hunting. They are massive, aggressive and semi-feral. They sleep in the Great Hall, gnawing on bones, fighting each other, and occasionally biting a servant. They are not house-trained. The floor of the hall is their toilet. And then there are the cats. You don't name them, you don't cuddle them. They are pest control. They are lean, scarred killers that live in the rafters hunting rats. If a cat survives to old age in a castle, it is because it is tougher than the knights. But the ultimate status symbol isn't a dog or a cat. It is a bird. The falcon. You love your falcon. You paid more for it than you pay your cook. You keep it on a perch in your bedroom. This sounds cool until you realise that birds go to the bathroom. A lot. And they project it. Your expensive tapestries? Streaked with white. Your bedspread? A target. The room smells of raw meat, falcon food, and guano. But you put up with it because walking around with a peregrine falcon on your fist tells everyone, I have time to train a bird that hates me. But the most dangerous animal in the castle isn't the falcon or the dog. It is the horse, specifically the destrier, the war horse. This isn't a pony. It is a 7,500-pound stallion bred for aggression. A destrier is trained to bite, kick, and trample. In battle, it is a weapon. In the stable, it is a liability. Grooms are killed by destriers all the time. You have to be careful when you walk past the stalls. If the horse is in a bad mood, it will take a chunk out of your shoulder. And the sound? The stables are right next to the living quarters. The stamping, the snorting, the kicking of wood. It is like living next to a 24-hour gym for angry bodybuilders. But the noise of the horses is nothing compared to the noise of the industry. A castle is a factory. It has to make everything it needs. You walk past the smithy. The blacksmith is the most important man in the castle after the lord. He makes the horseshoes, the nails, the hinges, the arrowheads. He is deaf. Almost certainly. He has been hammering red-hot iron since he was 12. Clang, clang, clang. All day, every day. The sound reverberates off the stone walls. If you have a headache, too bad. The smithy never stops. The air around his shop tastes of sulphur and coal dust. He is breathing metal filings. His lungs are black. But he is a magician. He turns rock into swords. And then there is the Fletcher. He makes arrows, thousands of them. He boils glue made from animal hooves. The smell of boiling glue is a unique kind of awful, like burning hair and rotting meat combined. He sits in a shed, attaching goose feathers to ashwood shafts. Every arrow is a piece of craftsmanship designed to end a life. But what if you want to end a life slowly? We have avoided it long enough. We have to go down, to the dungeon. Hollywood shows us a dungeon full of iron maidens, racks and thumbscrews. Reality is much simpler and much crueler. Most castles don't have elaborate torture chambers. Torture is a specialised legal procedure usually done in the big cities. In a local castle, the dungeon is just a holding cell, but it is a specific kind of cell, the oubliette. The word comes from the French oublier, to forget. It is a hole in the ground, a bottle-shaped pit dug into the foundation of the tower. The only entrance is a trapdoor in the ceiling. You are a prisoner. Maybe you are a captured knight waiting for ransom. Maybe you are a peasant who poached a deer. The guards open the trapdoor. They lower you down on a rope, or they just push you. You hit the floor. It is dark, pitch black. The air is stale. You feel around. The floor is wet. Why is it wet? Because the castle is built on the water table, or because the oubliette is next to the cesspit and it leaks. You crawl. You touch something. Bones. The prisoner before you died here. They didn't pull him out. Why bother? There is no toilet. You live in your own waste. There is no light. You go blind. There is no food service. They might lower a basket of bread once a day, or they might forget, hence the name. The horror of the oubliette isn't pain. It is sensory deprivation. It is the slow erasure of your humanity. You sit in the dark, listening to the muffled sounds of the feast happening 3 floors above you, knowing that no one is coming. But sometimes, the prisoner is valuable. If you capture a king or a duke, you don't put him in the pit. You put him in a tower room. You treat him well. You give him wine. You play chess with him. Why? Because he is a walking bag of gold. The ransom economy is the driving force of medieval warfare. You don't want to kill the enemy elite. You want to bankrupt them. A captured noble might live in your castle for years while his family raises the money. He becomes a weird sort of house guest. He attends your dinners. He flirts with your wife. But he can't leave. It is a polite kidnapping. But not everyone is polite. Let's talk about the castle guard. These are the men paid to stand on the wall and watch the horizon. It sounds like an easy job. It isn't. It is freezing on the wall walk. The wind cuts through their cloaks. They are bored. Boredom leads to drinking. Drinking leads to falling off the wall. Death by falling is a major cause of mortality in castles. No safety rails, slippery stones, heavy armour. Gravity is the ultimate enemy. And the guards are often mercenaries. They work for money, not loyalty. If the enemy offers them double, they might just open the gate at 3 a.m. So the Lord lives in fear of his own security team. He changes the passwords every night. He keeps the keys to the gate under his pillow. He trusts no one. Paranoia is the price of power. But let's step away from the fear and look at something beautiful, or at least something that tries to be. The garden. Inside the castle walls there is usually a small pleasure garden. A tiny patch of green. It has a fountain. It has rose bushes. It has a bench made of turf. Grass. This is the only place in the castle that smells good. It is the domain of the ladies. They come here to escape the stink of the great hall. They grow medicinal herbs. Sage, rosemary, rue. But they also grow flowers. The medievals loved flowers. But not just for looking at. They wore them. Garlands. Crowns of flowers. Chaplets. Why? To mask the smell of themselves. If you can't bathe, you wear a necklace of dried lavender. If your breath smells, you chew on a fennel seed. The garden is a perfumery. But the garden is also a pharmacy. And some of the plants are dangerous. We talked about the wise woman. But the castle lady knows her herbs too. She knows that pennyroyal can make a tea that helps with digestion, but if you drink too much, it causes a miscarriage, or death. She knows that wormwood kills parasites, but it also causes hallucinations. The garden is a toolbox, and in the wrong hands, a weapon. But the sun is setting. The castle gates are locked. The drawbridge is up. Night has come, and with the night comes the fire. Not the enemy fire, the domestic fire. The castle is full of straw, wood, tapestries and oil lamps. It is a tinderbox. Every night the couvre-feu bell rings. This is where we get the word curfew. It literally means cover fire. It is a law. You must cover your embers with a metal lid or ash. No open flames while you sleep, because if a fire starts in a castle, there is no escape. The spiral stairs turn into chimneys, sucking the smoke and flames upward. The windows are too small to jump from. You cook in your own fortress, so you obey the bell. You snuff the candles, you lie in the dark, you listen to the wind, you listen to the horses, you listen to the guard pacing above your head. Clank, clank, clank. You are safe. You are powerful. You are miserable. But tomorrow is a special day. Tomorrow the bishop is visiting, and when the church comes to the castle, everything changes. The food gets better, the manners get stiffer, and the hypocrisy gets louder. We are going to talk about the clash between the sword and the cross, and why the castle chapel is the most political room in the building. The gates open, the trumpets sound. But this isn't a military invasion. It is something far more expensive. The bishop is here. In the modern world, a visit from a religious leader is a spiritual event. In the Middle Ages, it is a logistical catastrophe. The bishop doesn't travel alone. He travels with a retinue. Priests, deacons, clerks, servants, cooks, and armed guards. He brings 50 horses. You are the lord of the castle. You are powerful, but you are terrified of this man. Why? Because he eats better than you do. You have to feed his entire entourage. You have to break out the good wine, the stuff you were saving for your daughter's wedding. You have to slaughter the best oxen. You have to pretend that you enjoy listening to hours of Latin sermons while your treasury drains away. The bishop rides into the courtyard wearing silk robes that cost more than your castle's outer wall. He looks at your muddy boots with a sneer. He is a prince of the church. He owns land. He collects tithes. He has his own army. You walk him to the chapel. Every castle has one. It is usually the most beautiful room in the fortress. Stained glass windows, rare, gold candlesticks, velvet altar cloths. It is designed to look like a little piece of heaven, but it feels like a freezer. You kneel on the stone floor. There are no pews. You kneel for hours. Your knees ache. The cold seeps up through your hose. The bishop drones on in Latin. You don't speak Latin. You speak French, if you are a noble, or English, if you're a commoner. You have no idea what he's saying, but you know you have to nod at the right times. But the chapel isn't just for prayer, it is for politics. The bishop leans over during the service. He whispers. He doesn't talk about God. He talks about land. The church needs that meadow by the river, he says. You hesitate. That meadow is your best grazing land. It would be a shame, the bishop continues, if we had to look into your grandfather's marriage contract. I heard rumours it wasn't valid, which would make you illegitimate. This is the weapon of the church, the pen. They keep the records, they write the history. If you anger the church, they can erase your legitimacy. They can declare your marriage void. They can turn your children into bastards. And the ultimate weapon? Excommunication. This is the nuclear bomb of the Middle Ages. If the bishop excommunicates you, you are spiritually dead. No one can talk to you. No one can feed you. Your vassals are released from their oaths of loyalty. They can kill you without sin. If you die while excommunicated, you go straight to hell. Do not pass go. Do not collect 200 gold pieces. So you give him the meadow. To seal the deal, the bishop gives you a gift. A relic. He pulls a small ornate box from his robes. He opens it. Inside, resting on a cushion of velvet, is a small grey shriveled object. The finger bone of St. Peter, he says reverently. You kiss it. You weep. You put it on the altar. Is it St. Peter's finger? Almost certainly not. There were enough fingers of St. Peter circulating in Europe to give the apostle 12 hands. It is probably the finger of a pig farmer named Ralph, who died 50 years ago. But it doesn't matter. You believe. And because you believe, you feel safer. You think this bone will stop the arrows. You think it will cure the plague. The relic economy is massive. Monasteries steal relics from each other. Furtum sacrum. Holy theft. Monks would break into a rival church, steal the bones of a saint, and bring them back to their own abbey. They would claim, "The saint wanted to move. He told us in a dream." It brings pilgrims. Pilgrims bring money. The bone pays for itself in a week. But there is a darker drama playing out in the chapel. You hear a commotion at the castle gate. Shouting, the clang of weapons. A man bursts into the courtyard. He is ragged, bloody, and terrified. The sheriff's men are right behind him. He runs. He isn't running to the keep. He is running to the chapel. He bursts through the doors, breathless, and grabs hold of the altar ring, a large iron ring attached to the stone. "Sanctuary!" he screams. The sheriff stops at the door. He is furious. He has his sword drawn. But he cannot cross the threshold. If he arrests the man inside the church, he commits a mortal sin. He will be excommunicated. This is the law of sanctuary. For 40 days the criminal is safe. The castle staff has to feed him. You, the Lord, are now hosting a murderer in your chapel. He is sleeping on the altar steps. He is eating your bread. The sheriff sets up a camp outside the door. He waits. It is a standoff. The bishop watches this with a smug smile. It is a reminder of who is really in charge. The king's law stops at the church door. After 40 days, the criminal has a choice: surrender and be hanged, or abjure the realm. This is a ritual of exile. The criminal strips down to a white tunic. He carries a wooden cross. He confesses his crime to the coroner. Then he has to walk, barefoot, to the nearest port city. He must stay on the main road. If he steps off the road, anyone can kill him. Once he reaches the sea, he has to catch the first ship leaving England. He is banished forever. It is a grim parade. You watch from the battlements as the murderer walks away, holding his cross, a ghost leaving the living world. The bishop leaves the next day. The wagons are loaded with your grain, your wine, and the deed to your meadow. You breathe a sigh of relief. You survived the church. But as you look out over the ramparts, you see something new, something that makes the bishop's threats look quaint. Down in the valley, a new army is gathering. They aren't carrying ladders. They aren't building trebuchets. They're dragging heavy iron tubes on wooden carriages. Cannons. You've heard rumours of these bombards. They say they spit thunder. They say they can knock down a stone wall from a mile away. You look at your castle, your high, beautiful, thick stone walls. They were built to stop arrows. They were built to stop battering rams. They were not built to stop a 300-pound iron ball moving at the speed of sound. The Middle Ages are ending. The age of gunpowder is beginning, and you are standing in a dinosaur. We're going to talk about the death of the castle, how a black powder from China turned the greatest fortresses in Europe into expensive piles of gravel, and how the knights, who spent centuries being the masters of war, suddenly found themselves getting shot by peasants with hand cannons. The romance is over. The industrial slaughter begins. You're standing on the ramparts. The enemy is a mile away. In the old days, you would be laughing. You would be drinking wine, waiting for them to starve. But today, you are sweating. You see a puff of white smoke in the distance. It looks small, harmless, like a cloud. Then you hear the sound. A crack like the sky splitting open. It is a sound your ears have never heard before. It isn't natural, it is chemical. And then the wall beneath your feet screams. A 300-pound stone ball has just slammed into the base of your tower. It didn't bounce off. It didn't chip the paint. It smashed the limestone into powder. The vibration travels up your legs and rattles your teeth. This is the bombard. It is a crude, ugly metal tube held together with iron hoops. It takes 20 minutes to reload. It explodes and kills its own crew half the time. But it doesn't matter, because it turns your expensive, impregnable fortress into a pile of very expensive gravel. You realise, with a sinking feeling in your gut, that the age of the castle is over. For 500 years, the stone wall was the ultimate power. If you had a wall, you were a king. Now, a wall is just a target. The enemy fires again. Boom! Another chunk of masonry falls away. You can't fight back. Your archers can't shoot a mile. You're a sitting duck in a stone cage. But the horror isn't just the cannon. It is the man holding the stick. Down on the battlefield you see a line of soldiers. They aren't wearing armour. They aren't riding horses. They are peasants. They are holding handgun, primitive muskets. They light a match. Bang. Smoke. A knight next to you falls. There is a hole in his breastplate. The armour that cost him a year's income, the armour that made him a tank, has been punched through by a lead ball the size of a marble. The knight is obsolete. Think about what that means. A knight spends his whole life training. He learns to ride, to fence, to wear the armour. He is a warrior elite, and he is killed by a baker who picked up a gun yesterday. This is the end of chivalry. Not because people stopped being nice, but because technology made fair fights stupid. Why duel with swords when you can shoot the other guy from across the field? The aristocracy hates it. They call it the coward's weapon. They try to ban it. The Pope tries to ban crossbows and guns, against Christians anyway. But you can't ban efficiency. The siege ends, not because you surrendered, but because your wall fell down. The enemy pours in, you survive, but you are changed. You look at your castle, it is ruined, and you realise you don't want to rebuild it. Why bother? If you build it thick enough to stop a cannon, it won't have windows. It will be a bunker, a tomb. So, the rich stop building castles. They start building palaces. If you can't defend yourself with walls, you might as well defend yourself with money. You build giant glass windows, you build gardens, you build houses designed for pleasure, not war. The stately home is born. But what happens to the old castles? They rot. You walk through the empty halls of a castle that has been abandoned. The roof has fallen in. The rain gets into the great hall. The tapestries rot on the walls. The rats take over the solar. The ivy climbs the tower. Peasants come in the night. They steal the stones. Why should the Lord have all the good rocks? They take the cut stone to build their barns. They take the lead from the roof to make fishing weights. The castle is cannibalized. It is eaten by the people it used to rule, and the lifestyle dies with it. There are no more troubadours. They are replaced by composers. There are no more jesters. They are replaced by theatre actors. There are no more monks copying books. They are replaced by printers. The medieval world is fading. It is becoming a memory, a story told to frighten children. Once upon a time, there were giants in metal suits. But before we leave this ruins, we have to look at one last thing: the waste. We have talked about the mud, the poop, and the blood, but we haven't talked about the sheer human cost of this era. You walk past the village graveyard. It is overflowing. The poor hole, a mass grave. You think about the people in there. The mother who died in childbirth at 16, the father who died of an infected tooth at 25, the child who died of the flux at 3. They didn't build castles. They didn't write history books. They just tried to stay warm. You realise that the romance of the Middle Ages is a lie painted over a mountain of skulls. We love the stories of King Arthur. We love the stories of Robin Hood. But if you could actually go back, if you could smell the open sewer and feel the lice biting your scalp, you wouldn't see romance. You would see a humanitarian disaster. But you would also see something else: resilience. These people survived. They had no antibiotics, no electricity, no rights. The world was trying to kill them every single day. The water, the air, the king, the church, everything was a threat. And yet they fell in love. They made jokes. They brewed beer. They carved gargoyles on the cathedrals just to make God laugh. They were tougher than us. They had to be. You stand in the ruins of the castle. The wind whistles through the arrow loop. It's time to go. The sun is setting on the Middle Ages. The Renaissance is rising. The modern world is waking up, but you have one last stop. You have to go back to where you started, to your own bed, to your own time. But the journey back isn't instant. You have to carry the memory with you, because once you know what the past really smelled like, you can never look at a castle the same way again. We are going to wrap this up. We are going to take off the armour, wash off the mud, and step back into the light. And we are going to ask the final question. If the past was so terrible, why do we dream about it? So, here we are, standing in the ruins of the fantasy. We have peeled back the velvet curtains and found the mould growing underneath. We have looked at the knight in shining armour and seen a man suffocating in a tin can, terrified of a peasant with a hand cannon. We have smelled the fresh air of the countryside and realised it was mostly pig manure and wood smoke. And yet, if you go to a bookstore tomorrow, you will see rows of romance novels with castles on the cover. You will see movies about King Arthur. You will see video games where you build your own fortress. Why? If the reality was so horrific, if it was a world of toothaches, frozen toes, and constant fear, why do we keep going back? Why do we dream of the castle? Because we filter the history. We keep the stained glass and throw away the cesspit. We keep the sword fight and edit out the dysentery. We keep the feast and forget the starvation. We romanticize the Middle Ages not because we want to live there, but because it represents something we think we have lost. Clarity. In the modern world, life is complicated. Taxes, emails, traffic, anxiety about the future. It is a low-level hum of stress. But in the castle, life was binary. You survive, or you don't. You eat, or you starve. You're safe behind the wall, or the wall falls down. It was brutal, yes, but it was simple. There is a strange comfort in that simplicity. The idea that if you just have a strong enough wall and a sharp enough sword, you can keep the bad things out. But you know the truth now. You know that the bad things are already inside. The rat in the wall, the bacteria in the water, the ambition in the heart of your brother. The castle couldn't save them. But look at you. You are lying in a bed that is softer than any king ever knew. You have a pillow that isn't a bag of straw. You have a blanket that isn't infested with fleas. You're breathing air that is temperature controlled. If you're thirsty, you can drink water that won't kill you. If you have a headache, you can take a pill that actually works instead of drilling a hole in your skull. You are living in a world that the medieval alchemists tried to create with magic, but we built with science. You are the sorcerer. You have the light in your hand, your phone. You have the world knowledge in your pocket. You have the luxury of time. So, as you let go of the day, I want you to feel that gratitude. Feel the warmth of your room. It is a miracle. Feel the safety of your locked door. It is a luxury. Feel the silence. It is a gift. The drawbridge is up, the portcullis is down, but not to keep the world out, to let you rest. The medieval world is gone. The fires have burned down to ash. The shouts of the watchmen have faded into history. The castles are empty shells, home only to tourists and crows. But the people, they are still here. They are in your DNA. You have the resilience of the peasant who survived the winter. You have the cleverness of the merchant who navigated the market. You have the endurance of the sailor who crossed the dark sea. You are the result of thousands of years of survival. You made it. So now, you can do the one thing they couldn't. You can sleep, truly sleep, without one ear open for the wolf, without worrying if the fire will go out, without fear of the morning. The past is a story, the future is a dream, but the present is soft and warm and safe. Good night.